Pokemon just announced the return of the World Championship Series for 2022, and I am super excited. Hey everybody, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we're going to be talking about some do's and don'ts of shuffling. Why is shuffling so important? Well, it's an important part of the game, and there have been a bunch of new players who have been introduced to the Pokemon trading card game, or maybe just any trading card game over the past year and a half or so because of boredom during quarantine. And if you've only played online or you only played with friends and you don't really care too much about shuffling or some shuffling details, then when you go to your first League Cup, League Challenge, Regionals, whatever it is, you might be in a little bit of trouble when it comes to shuffling. So the purpose of this video is to talk about 3 types of shuffling, one of which is not acceptable method of randomization, and then some do's and don'ts of shuffling and I guess etiquette, if you will. Before we go any further, if you are enjoying the video or you want to learn more about Pokemon trading card game, hit the subscribe button and bell notification so you never miss another video. Most of the people who watch my video are not subscribed, and I'm really trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark. So if you aren't already, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It helps tremendously. With that all said, let's get into some shuffling. I have my deck here. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is mash shuffling. Mash shuffling is very, very simple. I'm going to take half of the deck and I'm going to just slide it in. There we go. And get it all nice and even before I repeat. How many times do I need to do this in order to shuffle a deck? And what is considered sufficient shuffling? Mathematically, 7 times, 7 shuffles is the most randomized your deck will be. So we want to do it 7 times. Now you might not always have the time to actually do it, or maybe you kind of have to get moving, but do keep that in mind. 7 is the magic number. But what is actually shuffling? How do I know when I shuffled enough? Well, shuffling is more or less defined as randomizing the cards in such a way that you no longer know the order of them. And it's really important that you don't know the order of your cards because, well, if you do know the order of your cards, then it's cheating. So, and before anyone gets offended, yes, if you stack your deck, if you mana weave or energy weave, whatever you want to call it in Pokemon, that is cheating. It's a form of stacking a deck. I said it. So, now that we know what mash shuffling is, there's some do's and don'ts when it comes to mash shuffling. The first is, well, I guess we'll go over the don'ts first, and then we'll talk about the do's. So what you do not want to do is be looking at your cards when you shuffle. But Nick, how am I supposed to shuffle if I can't look at them? You practice. Practice at home. Sit on the couch, turn on the TV, listen to some music, and just shuffle. How do you shuffle? I guess we'll finish the do's before we talk about how to do it a little more effectively. Another thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be looking at your opponent's cards while they're shuffling. If you happen to be looking at your opponent, because you should be watching what they're doing, and they're shuffling in such a way that you can see their cards, something like this, then you got to tell them. You have to tell them. You don't have to forget what you've seen. You don't have to be Bart Simpson on the plane who hits himself in the head with the phone to forget the Spanish he learned on his trip to Brazil because they speak Portuguese in Brazil. That was such a stretch for a reference that no one's gonna get. Still worth it though. So if your opponent's shuffling and they're shuffling in such a way that you can see their cards, they're doing some crazy stuff, especially if their cards are like face up like this. Well, if you can see them, they can see them. So you gotta tell them, hey, you gotta hide the cards. So don't look at your cards. Don't look at your opponent's cards. Those are the main do's, the main don'ts. How do you actually go ahead and not look at your cards when you shuffle? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my cards off to the side and turn them so the back is facing my opponent, and now I'm looking straight. Right? I'm not looking at my camera. My camera's a little elevated. I'm looking straight. I'm looking at where my opponent would be, and I'm watching their hands, and I'm making sure that they're not stacking their deck and they're not doing anything deceitful or dishonest, because yes, it is something that people will do. Is it super common for people to cheat? I don't really know, because people often don't know that they're cheating. People don't know stacking the deck, mana weaving, energy weaving, whatever. They don't know that it's a type of cheating. So they think they're just getting a competitive advantage of, sorting their cards a certain way, but it is in fact cheating. So here I can't see any of the cards, and I can successfully shuffle my deck without having to look. Now, mass shuffling is fine. You do a couple of mass shuffles, and a better version is what we call the riffle shuffle, where you split the cards again into 2 piles, and you are going to, just like a deck of playing cards. Now, I have poor success doing it side to side. They always stack up on me like this, and it looks like a really bad TP. And I actually end up not shuffling the cards really at all. So how do I get around that? Well, I am going to bring just the corners of the cards together and riffle those. God, I love that sound. And from here, I just kind of lightly swing them in and push together, even them out, and repeat. Again, I might do this 2 to 4 times, depending on how many times I've mass shuffled already, and if my opponent's sitting there waiting for me. I don't necessarily care if my opponent's waiting for me too much. If they don't want to shuffle their deck, that's fine. I mean, it's not really fine, and we'll talk about that. They don't have to shuffle their deck. I'm going to shuffle it for them, though. So after I mass shuffle a couple times, now I gave it a good riffle shuffle, I will hand it over to my opponent, and they are going to get the opportunity to shuffle and cut my deck. Yes, my opponent can shuffle my deck, and just like I can shuffle my opponent's deck. So when I take my opponent's deck, this is now my opponent's deck, I'm going to, I tend not to riffle my opponent's deck, but I'm going to do the same thing I did with mine. I'm going to hide it so I can't see the cards and so that they can't see the cards. And I'm going to shuffle a couple of times, make sure that it's really, randomized well. And after I shuffle to my satisfaction, probably just a couple of mass shuffles, I'm going to present it back to them. But before they take it, I am going to give it a final cut. The reason I give it a final cut before I let my opponent take it is I don't want them to think that I stacked their deck. There are ways of maneuvering cards to the front or the top or the bottom of the deck, and I don't really want to show people how to do it, because I don't want people to take away from this video ways to cheat. But there are ways to, like, if I want to push this Umbreon to the top of the deck, I can absolutely do it. You could just shuffle and look, now this Umbreon's at the top of the deck, right? Just like if I want to bring this Umbreon to the bottom of the deck, I can bring this Umbreon to the bottom of the deck, and now it's at the bottom, right? Umbreon's at the bottom. So there are definitely ways to manipulate cards and maneuver them, and if your opponent is stacking your deck in such a way that you have all evolution Pokemon or all energies in your hand, and you're like, well, I can't do anything with this, that's a problem. So that's why you have your opponent cut your deck, and you cut your opponent's deck before you return it to the owner. If your opponent shuffles your deck and they just give it to you, they don't cut it, you can ask them to cut your deck. If they refuse, just get a judge. And I know it seems a little petty, it might seem like you're trying to waste time or so, just get a judge. Don't care about don't listen to your opponent, right? They want to win. Get the judge, they will shuffle the deck and make it randomized. And now you can be confident that it's fair. Because realistically, there's no proof. Unless you have video proof that your opponent is stacking the deck, you have no way of verifying. You could have just gotten a really bad hand, and it does happen. However, if you are unsatisfied with the way your opponent handled your deck and that they didn't cut it or anything like that, you can get a judge. Something else you can get a judge for is if you drop, or your opponent drops a card while shuffling. If you're shuffling and they just drop a card, if it drops on the table and you see it, whatever, right? Just like if your opponent sees one of your cards you drop, it happens. You just pick it up and shuffle it back into the deck, and you continue like nothing happened. But if you drop a card on the floor, now it's a little different. Because Pokemon, unlike other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, do not allow sideboards. You are not allowed to have a side deck to say, oh man, I'm playing Zacian Zamazenta, and game 1 I got crushed because of Cape of Toughness. Game 2, I want to add some more Tool Scrappers to deal with it. You can't do that in Pokemon. So, you have to, if you drop a card on the floor, you should get a judge to come over and pick it up. Maybe they'll verify it against your deck list, maybe they won't, but they'll put it back into the deck for you. Maybe they'll shuffle your deck, maybe they'll watch you shuffle your deck. Every judge is probably going to handle a little bit different depending on the size of the tournament and how many other judges there are. So they might have other people they have to go help and assist. So don't be afraid to call a judge. Honestly, dropping a card on the floor might be one of the easier things a judge deals with that day, or shuffling your deck because your opponent won't cut is something that the judge is probably not going to be unhappy to do, right? Like they're not going to be mad at you for having them do this. It's a fair part of the game. So now we talked about 2 different types of shuffling, mash and riffle, and some do's and don'ts, and how to handle your opponent's deck and how you should expect your opponent to handle yours. And I know I realized that I've said handle and deck a couple of times in the same sentence, and that can sound weird. Anyway, ah man. So, what is the unacceptable method of shuffling? And that's called pile shuffling. Pile shuffling is literally just making piles of cards, and this is not shuffling, because if I previously stacked my deck or arranged my deck in such a way that I know what pile is going to have what cards, that's not randomization. And you, as the opponent, don't know if your opponent had done that. So if your opponent pile shuffles and they present you their deck, right? Like they finish their pile shuffling and they say, okay, here you go, here's my deck. Cut, please. Don't cut that. You take that and you give it some thorough mash shuffling. You give it that a real once over. And by once over, I mean like a 5 times over. You need to make sure that they are not stacking their deck, because there are several magic tricks, like regular playing card magic tricks, that do things like pile shuffling, and they know, the magician knows exactly where the cards are. They are not hard things to do, especially in Pokemon, where, you know, depending on the deck you're playing, you have so many copies of one card. You know, you have so many switches, and you have so many Houndooms and Evolution Incense and all these things that you have high counts of. So it's easy to kind of distribute them over the course of a deck and then pile shuffle and maintain that integrity. The order might be a little different, but ultimately the integrity of how many energies and Pokemon and trainers that they've kind of sorted is maintained in pile shuffling. And so that's why it's not considered sufficient shuffling, at least especially to me. I don't know if Pokemon has an official stance on pile shuffling. You can pile shuffle and then mash or riffle shuffle afterwards, and pile shuffling has its place to demonstrate that you have exactly 60 cards. You don't want to go into a match with 61 cards, 62 cards. So, you know, it's a good way to do. It might be something to do at the beginning of a match. It might be a good thing to do in between matches, kind of just pile, count out your cards, make sure you didn't miss any, something like that. But always make sure you mash or riffle afterwards. Otherwise, it can look like you're trying to stack the deck. So yeah, just make sure you sit on the couch, practice so that you get used to mash shuffling. Another thing, another quick tip with shuffling, especially mash shuffling. If I'm holding these cards tight, they're never gonna go. They're never gonna go, and I'm gonna break the sleeves. I can damage the card. What I want to do is kind of loosely hold it in my hand so that as I put pressure, you can see that they fan out, and then just kind of slide a little bit to weave them or work them into place. I tend to try and work them at the bottom corner, so the sleeve opens up here at the top. So I'm going to try to work at the bottom and push down there a little bit, because if I push on top, you know, who knows, one of the sleeves could get pushed into another sleeve or something like that, and then it breaks, and if you don't have backups, it's a problem. always have backup sleeves. If you run inner sleeves like I do, I double sleeve my cards, have extras, outer sleeves, extra inner sleeves that are exactly the same as the sleeves that your deck uses. If this sleeve breaks, I can't go and grab a white sleeve. Like, that's marking cards. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all the information I have on shuffling, and good luck in in-person tournaments, right? Hopefully I'll see you at some tables. I don't know why I made it sound like I was ending the video right there, but we still have this little thing to do. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this a little bit informative and, if not, enjoyable to watch. If you did, hit that subscribe button and bell notification so that you can see all the videos I make pertaining to the Pokemon trading card game, because yes, we do online stuff, but I also do in-person stuff like this, and you might not want to miss it. Also, if you really want to help the channel grow, hitting that like button and leaving a comment are the best ways to tell YouTube this is a good video and other people should watch it. Let me know what you think of the different types of shuffling and what sleeves are best for shuffling. I use Dragon Shield, that's my favorite sleeve, but maybe you got something different that I can try in the future. But like I said, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.